Everyone, this is Fabio and welcome back, and today we're going to do a game discussion video on the latest game that I finished. The only thing, I hope that the background noise is not too much, but I need to keep the window open. It's insanely hot here in London. I'm sweating right now. Well, it's terrible. But on a positive note here, I mean, this heat is murdering me, but we're here for a game discussion video, as I say, and we're going to talk about this game right here, Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, the third. Finished this yesterday evening, and this was, together with Mass Effect Andromeda, this was my most anticipated game for 2017. So now I have to wait for something else, as we all know that we've waited so long for these games. I mean, once Trails in the Sky was released, there was this whole questioning and anticipation on the following game, and with the whole issue of second chapter not being released for years and years before it finally came over here, it was really special. It adds to this all hype and expectation on these Trails games, and also like the fact that they finally exceed. Of course, there's also Siren now, and the fact that Exceed actually managed to finally release the third here in the West. It was only on Steam, but as I always say, I mean, it's better than not having a game at all. I mean, of course, I would have preferred it was like released like when it at the same time was released in Japan, physical, all of that. I would love to have the Evolution games, but we can't have it all. It doesn't matter, because at least we have one way to play the game, and that's the most important thing at the end of the day. Physical, digital, doesn't really matter. I have my Japanese copy of the game, physical, just for collection purposes, and I'm very happy with that. I enjoy the game on Steam immensely, and what a great game. What a great way to end the story. It's not the end of the Legend of Heroes series, that's for sure. It's an interesting story, I would say. Without spoiling everything, trying to sum up what's happening in there. Trails in the Sky the Third takes place soon after the events of second chapter, and the whole story, it has this feeling that it's more of a side story, actually, because as we know, if you play second chapter, this is a bit of a spoiler, but the game, with the end of that game, that's the end of the main story that started with first chapter, so the story of Joshua and Estelle. It ends with second chapter. The third, as I said, it's more of a side story, but what a side story. It was really amazing. Its main focus is actually the character of Kevin Graham, and I'm pretty sure that it was already introduced. It was introduced in first chapter. It was a big part, an important character in second chapter. And other than him, there is the introduction of a new character in Race Argent. They're both members of a religious order. Where was I? Of course, I like a phone call or something. They was talking about Kevin and Race. They are member of a religious or military sort of order, which is sort of like secret, but known into like important circles, like politicians and stuff like that. And don't ask me to say the name, because I cannot remember it. I mean, it's Graal's Litter or something like that, and in which there are like other high-ranking members called the Dominions. And something in my nose. And the game starts with Kevin infiltrating like a criminal or something, as if you remember from second chapter, one of his main duty is to recover artifacts and stuff like that. And the story starts by him recovering an artifact that all of a sudden, all of a sudden, something started to happen. New characters are introduced. Among them, her name is Erica, I think. Erica Russell, like Tita's mother, who is absolutely like hilarious. One of my favorite characters of these games. But the main focus of the story, basically, even though it might seem as a sort of dungeon crawler or something, because at the end of the day you're just in one huge dungeon that you're progressively exploring, even though it changed like the look of the dungeon, like the various stages are different from one another. Of course, you have to overcome trials. It's all about progressively discovering the story of Kevin, and I was surprised by by how dark this story actually gets. I was really impressed because playing other Legend of Heroes games, they can get pretty dark at times, but I think this was one of the darkest chapters in a way. I mean, don't let be fooled by the very bright and colorful and cheerful cover, because it's it's at the time like a depressing game, but in a good sense, because it is a very sad story. And by the end, when you discover more about his past and what happened and stuff like that, you're like, man, this is very cool, but very dark and tragic stuff, actually. But and also, it's very important to understand the role of Rias. I mean, Rias, confusing names now, but who is a very important character, of course, in this story. But I don't want to tell too much because it might be a spoiler about her. And one thing that is worth noticing at the same time, at first it's focused only on Kevin and Rias. Progressively, as they explore this dungeon called the Phantasma, I think, because there's also a stage called Phantasmagoria, but I think that's like the end stage or something. And I've always found that name funny. But progressively, as they explore this dungeon, they discover like this shining orbs into which you can find other characters who are characters from the previous Trails in the Sky games. And to me, this sort of system was the ultimate sort of send-off and fan service to us fans of the Trails in the Sky games. And it was very great to see all these characters once again, especially because it's, as we know, it's a completely different cast of characters from the Trails of Cold Steel games. So after playing Cold Steel 2, it was great to see again like Joshua, Estelle, Sherazard playing as Oliver and other like Chloe, Julia. I mean, all the main characters from the Trails in the Sky games are into this. You can form a party up to 16 of these characters. Even Ren joins up, which is awesome. And the great thing is, other than following the main story, there is a lot of side stuff to do, and mainly in the forms of doors that you find in throughout these dungeons. There are moon doors, star doors, and sun doors. Basically, each and every of these doors contains like story segments focused on each and every character, basically. Like a moon door, it's a long story segment. A star door, yeah, it's a shorter story segment, while a sun door contains maybe story segments, but also mini games. And there are a lot of them. So it is a good idea to explore the dungeon to find these doors, because you can receive rewards by just witnessing all these story segments, which is also great because most of them it's character development and information on certain characters, like what they're doing now, what certain things on their past. For example, there's one door focused on Ren's past, which is, boy, that it's dark, for example. Or another focus on the past of Josh Estelle, another on Sherazard. or stuff that happened right at the end of second chapter before the beginning of the third. So it's very interesting to see all these little developments, even important ones. And one that was very, very cool, it's a door that it's focused on Oliver and Mueller, especially because I think it properly introduced Chancellor Osborne, a character that if you play Trails of Cold Steel, you're more familiar with. I think because I'm pretty sure it was introduced, but just by name in second chapter. But in here, you actually meet him and you understand more about his policy and his rivalry with Oliver, and it was really great. I mean, it's amazing how these Trails games are all well connected with each other. Like, there is another door that explains facts that are happening in Erebonia, and that it's something that we know from Trails of Cold Steel, like when the Jaegers were attacking the Bracer Guild's branches across the Empire. So, very interesting stuff. So this is one of the reasons why the game is very long, because you want to find all these doors, unlock all these side stories, and that allows you to furtherly develop these already very well developed characters. So it's amazing how by the end of the game, you're so familiar with these characters, you're so attached to them, because you feel that you know them after 3 big games, that you follow them. It's kind of natural. And it also plays with the ending, because I don't, of course I'm not going to tell you what happened, but there's this big goodbye scene that the party basically, of course, they have to split ways to go back to what they were doing before this whole accident. And it was kind of emotional, if I have to be honest. I mean, for a video game, naturally. But to see all the characters saying goodbyes and all of that, it was pretty great, because, as I said, you're so attached to these characters, which was very. I was very satisfied by the way the third ended, and it really closed down the whole liberal saga of the Legend of Heroes and Trails games. Gameplay, nothing new from second chapter. So if you played that, it's exactly the same thing. So it is this slightly improved version of the Trails in the Sky first chapter combat system, which is great, because if you're not familiar with that, it's a combination between a strategy RPG and a turn-based RPG. So that's perfection, basically. Plus, there is a sort of materia system with the Orbment and Quartz system that allows you to improve your stats or add, for example, variation of status, and very cool stuff of various elements. So you can massively customize your party, focusing on improving the main strengths of your characters. Like, for example, in my case, what's a good example? I mean, of course, obvious ones such as Kevin or Oliver are mainly focused on magic attack. But for example, I made Sherazard a beast with damage, but also magic attack, since he's quite good at that. Or characters such as Annelance or Richard, I made them very powerful. But both in terms of physical attack and magic support in this case. So you can have all this kind of combination that are very useful in battle, to say. But really, as I said, if you play second chapter, it's the exactly same thing. So not much to say, but it's such a good combat system. I cannot stress that, because it's hard to say if I prefer this over the Trails of Cold Steel combat system, which is basically the same thing. It's not different. It's just a slightly updated version of that, mainly graphically, but there's also some functions there which are not in Trails in the Sky. But it's such a good combat system. I really like it. One thing that I have to mention, that I don't know if I talked about this when I talk about it when I talk. Nice. I don't know if I mentioned this when I was talking about second chapter. And also, while I was thinking this about making comparison with Trails of Cold Steel, but I love these graphics of both of the Trails in the Sky trilogy, which it's basically, if you play Ys games such as Oath in Falgana or Origin, I think it's the same engine. it looks very familiar with Othin Falgana, for example, which again it's great because it's such a gorgeous. The sprites of these characters are so gorgeous that I absolutely love them. Of course, like Treasure Cold Steel has this big like graphical update, and it's great. Of course, it looks amazing on the beta. Since I play there, I'm seeing constantly like pictures or something about Treasure Cold Steel 3, which it's on PS4, and it looks amazing. But playing the third, I was really like, man, I love these sprites, even though it's not as detailed as Treasure Cold Steel. There's something special about sprites in graphics to me. I mean, I cannot help it. I love these things. I mean, you can even see the emotion through these sprites. It's impressive the amount of work is in there. I was really positively surprised, I have to say. Like a scene when a character is crying, you can see the eyes moving, or when they hug each other or stuff like that. I just love this style. I wish they'll make more games like this. I think the two Crossbell games are similar. I forgot to look at because I have them physical, but of course they're the Japanese version. So, but I think they're kind of similar to the original side. It's the Cold Steel trilogy that really upscaled the graphics. But I just want to mention it because I really love this graphical style of like first chapter, second chapter, and the third. They're just gorgeous. I mean, that engine that like powered the Ease games like Othin Falgana, Origin, as I said, and these Trails games. It's just gorgeous. I mean, fantastic stuff. Another thing that I have to mention specifically for the third, it's the music. I mean, of course it's a great soundtrack. It's Falcom, it's JDK. Naturally, it's great. But I think Trails in the Sky the Third might have my favorite Trails soundtrack so far. It's very hard to say. I mean, maybe, I don't know, because like Cold Steel 1, second chapter, first chapter, I mean, these soundtracks are fantastic, but the third, it's basically a combination of music from first and second chapter with some original music. So that's why I love it so much, because the music from these Trails in the Sky games are just phenomenal. And I would, as I said, maybe the third might be my favorite, and I might prefer it even over the Trails of Cold Steel games, which have amazing soundtracks. Of course, I mean, it's not a surprise. Falcom has this ace in their sleeves with JDK, and every time there's a Falcom game, you cannot wait to hear the music. I mean, for example, now I remember, another of my most anticipated games for the year is, of course, Tokyo Xanadu. I cannot wait to play that, but also I cannot wait to listen to the soundtrack of the game, because I never played a Xanadu game. So I'm super curious about that. But as I said, when you're waiting for a Falcon game, you're also waiting for the soundtrack, because they're usually that amazing. Like, think of Ease, think of Legend of Heroes, think of the Trails games, because also the Gaga trilogies had amazing musics. But I think the third might be my winner so far, even better than Cold Steel 2, which was really good, but it's just something about the Trails in the Sky soundtrack that's special to me. Like the music, like Dancing with the Wind, Fate of the Fairies, Silver Wheel, all that music were just so good. I mean, they're just so good. There's nothing to add. So, what else? I don't know if I'm forgetting something or not, but yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say, because this is the third installment of the series, which already talk about both previous games, but it's slightly different just in terms of story, because it seems it might seem not as connected with the other story, but it is connected. So I mean, if you like the previous Trails game, I mean, this is a no-brainer. I mean, of course, like, I bought this day one. It really plays great. I mean, I played this. It took me slightly more than 60 hours, so it's not as long as the Cold Steel game, but it's still a fair share of awesome RPG affair. Oh, another music I remember. There's when you reach there's like this orphanage. It's way on in the game, but I'm not telling what's happening. But there is this music with this like young woman or something singing this sort of chorus. It's just beautiful. I mean, I just remember that. It's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it has a great story, which it's connected, but especially through those doors, all this side story, you find all these different connections with the political situation in the continent, which is what's going on, references to what's going on in Erebonia since Cold Steel is approaching, and but also all the personal struggles and situation with all these characters. It's such a great stuff. I mean, I love these Trails games. I mean, as you probably know, I mean, it's not a surprise that mainly because of Trails in the Sky, Legend of Heroes has become one of my favorite RPG series of all time. Of course, Cold Steel helped, but it all started from Trails in the Sky, and I mean, I can see why after I played all three of the games. This is such a fantastic RPG trilogy. Easily one of the best I ever played. I mean, it's just that these games are just that good. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, I would say that second chapter it's still the best because it has the best story. The real presentation of Ouroboros, because they just steal the show in that game. I mean, they're here as well because, as I said, it's a fun service to Trails fan, but it's not the same thing. But it's also, for being a side story, it's just really good. I mean, excellent storytelling, and Falcom did it again. Not surprises. I mean, but I remember hearing some sort of complaint. It's like, oh, it's just like a dungeon crawler. It's not very good. I mean, what are you talking about? It's really good. I mean, yes, you're not exploring Liberl for the third time in a row. That wouldn't be necessary. In a way, you kind of do, but in a way, it's kind of weird. But it's a really, I would say, it's a good way to end a trilogy, which is very well connected with the rest of the main saga. And it's this whole connection with the other Trails games, like from technically after this one, I would like to play Zero no Kiseki. It's interesting that I actually managed to find an ISO of the game. I need to find the time to see if it works. But if it works, oh my god, I can play Zero no Kiseki in English. But there's that. A lot of the connection with the Trails of Cold Steel games. I mean, I love this. Especially because since I never had the chance of playing the Suikoden games, I'm not used to this interconnected RPGs, and I love this. I mean, once I'm done with all the Trails games, then I will play Suikoden. I'm saying this now. I cannot. I don't think I can handle that series now, like playing Suikoden at the same time as Trails. Also because Suikoden games are crazy expensive, so we'll see in the future. But yeah, I love these games all connected with each other, and every game has this very amazing stories and unforgettable characters. And yeah, as I said, it's no wonder that I love them so much. So just to end this, because I don't want to say too much about the story, and honestly, like in terms of gameplay, just watch my previous video on second chapter or first chapter, or anything like that, because it's just the same. So I cannot tell you. So noisy. But I cannot recommend Trails in the Sky the third enough. But you need to play the other two games if you haven't, because they're all connected. So if you haven't, and why you haven't, play first chapter, second chapter, and end this fantastic trilogy with a phenomenal third chapter, which says the word end once and for all on this group of characters, I should say, not on the story, because the story goes on. But a really good game. Couldn't be more happy, because honestly, I didn't know what to expect from the third, especially with the way the second chapter ended. I was like, oh, what's going to happen? Great stuff. Great stuff happens. Of course it does when there's a Legend of Heroes game involved. So that's it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Huge recommendation for the Trails in the Sky game, but probably most of you have played them. If you haven't, I cannot recommend it enough. They're just that good. Easily some of the best RPGs you can play, and some of the best ever made in this last decade, I would say. I mean, they're amazing games, and I'm sad that I cannot play another Trails in the Sky game since the story is over. But I love this cast of characters. So that's it for me, guys. I was just rambling now, but I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and take care.